Welcome to the deep dive. You've been exploring some really interesting stuff lately, sending over this great research on cognitive load and, well, creative thinking.
That's right.
So, what we want to do today in this deep dive is really get under the hood, see how these two things connect, that they seem quite different on the surface,
Oh, they
right?
do?
And pull out what you can actually use from it all.
Absolutely. We've been digging into the material you shared, and yeah, especially this really thorough, systematic literature review. It's quite something.
A review. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's like a meta study. It looks at the findings from, I think, 33 different articles,
Mm-hmm.
all from major research databases.
33.
Yeah,
Wow.
all focused on this intersection where our mental effort meets our ability to be creative. So it gives us a pretty broad evidence-based view.
Okay, a solid foundation then. And the big question we're wrestling with, the one that seems to keep coming up, is how does the amount of, let's call it mental oomph we're using,
Hmm.
when our brains are really working hard, how does that actually affect our creative spark?
Right.
You might instinctively think, well, less effort, more creativity, surely. But the research you sent definitely suggests it's a bit more complicated than that.
That's a really crucial point. Yeah. One of the first things that jumps out from this review is that cognitive load isn't just one single thing.
Ah.
It plays several different roles when researchers are looking at creativity. It's not just a simple on-off switch or, a plus or minus.
Okay, let's unpack those roles then. The review says cognitive load can act as a, let's see, a mediator, a moderator, an independent variable, a dependent variable,
Right?
and even just part of the basic theory how researchers think about creativity. That sounds a bit academic, maybe?
It can sound that way, but it's actually key to understanding the nuance here.
Okay.
Think of mediator like this. Say you find out listening to certain music helps you brainstorm better. Cognitive load could be the reason why.
How so?
Well, maybe the music relaxes you, it lowers your mental load,
Right.
and that lower load is what lets your creative thoughts flow more easily. It's the go-between.
The middleman, got it. And moderator.
A moderator changes the strength of a relationship. Imagine background noise. Its effect on your creativity might be different depending on how much mental effort you're already putting into your task.
So the noise's impact is modified by your existing load, like a volume control.
Exactly, like a volume control on the impact. Then, as an independent variable, that's when researchers deliberately change the cognitive load.
They're tweaking it.
Yeah, to see what happens to creativity. They manipulate the load to see the effect. As a dependent variable, cognitive load is what they're measuring.
So they look at different tasks and see which ones result in more or less mental effort.
Precisely. And finally, sometimes it's just built into the model, the theoretical framework. It's part of their basic understanding of how creativity works.
Baked right in. Okay, that clarifies things a lot. So let's zoom in on some of these studies. What about where cognitive load was the independent variable, where they actively played with the mental effort level? What did those experiments show?
Well, a really common method you see is using memory tasks. Several studies, Bose and colleagues, Dudreau et al., Roskis et al., all around 2012, 2013, they did this.
What did they do?
They'd ask people to do creative tasks while also trying to remember, say, a short number sequence versus a really long one.
Like 2 digits versus 10 digits.
Something like that, yeah. And the pretty consistent finding was when you had to remember the longer number, which bumps up the cognitive load,
Yeah.
creativity often took a hit.
Trying to be innovative while your brain's clinging onto 10 digits sounds like trying to juggle chainsaws.
Huh. Yeah, it does feel like that. It really seems our working memory, that mental scratch pad we use, it's got limited space.
Right.
So if a big chunk of it is busy with a demanding memory task, there's just less room left for the kind of open-ended thinking creativity needs.
Makes sense. But was it always negative?
Well, here's an interesting counterpoint. A 2021 study by Aldalala looked at infographics. They compared presenting info with images and text versus images and sound. And interestingly, the image and sound combo actually seemed to reduce cognitive load for the learners,
Reduce it? How?
maybe multimodal processing. Anyway, this reduction was linked to better creative thinking skills.
So it's not just how much info, but how it's presented. Using different senses coherently might actually free up bandwidth?
Exactly. It's like making the initial processing more efficient, leaving more room upstairs for the creative stuff. Similarly, Sa and colleagues in 2016, they looked at a task where people mentally combined shapes into 3 or 5 shapes.
Okay.
They found a link between working with a manageable number of shapes, not too complex, and experiencing flow.
Flow. That state of being totally absorbed.
Right. that suggests that cognitive engagement needs to be just right.
Yeah.
Challenging enough to be engaging, but not so overwhelming, it breaks your focus, which is often tied to creativity.
So there's almost like a Goldilocks zone for cognitive load and creativity. Not too little, not too much.
Precisely. Just right. Then you have studies like Kleinkor's et al.'s from 2021. They use the alternative uses task.
Where you brainstorm uses for an object like a brick.
Exactly. They had people do that while also doing a digit tracking task to add load. They found higher load was linked to lower quality creative ideas, not just fewer ideas.
Quality too, huh?
Yeah. And Rodet's 2022 study, also using the AUT but with memory load single versus 7 digits, found something similar. More load negatively hit both the number and the variety of ideas.
So these studies really do point towards high cognitive load often being a barrier, both for generating ideas and for how good those ideas are.
In many situations, yes, that seems to be the case.
But were there any cases where higher loads seemed helpful? Or maybe where it wasn't about load itself?
Well, not exactly helpful high load, but Kassim et al. 2014 study in engineering education is relevant. They look at multimedia learning tools. They found these tools help manage cognitive load effectively. And because the load was managed, students generated more flexible and original ideas. So it wasn't about increasing load, but optimizing it with tools.
That makes perfect sense if the tool handles some of the processing grunt work.
Right, your brain isn't so bogged down and can focus on making those novel connections.
Yeah.
Then Mao et al.'s 2022 research. This was interesting. They looked at online searching for creative question generation. They brought in this idea of need for cognitive closure.
Need for closure, like wanting definite answers.
Exactly. They found students high in this need actually experienced lower cognitive load with certain structured search strategies. And that lower load linked to better creative question generation.
Whoa, that's fascinating. So for some people, a clear structure might actually reduce mental clutter and help creativity.
It suggests that, yeah, individual cognitive styles seem to play a role in how we experience and react to cognitive load during creative tasks.
Really interesting.
And then Howe et al.'s 2014 study on incubation, stepping away from a problem.
Letting it simmer.
Right. They found that doing both low demand and high demand tasks during that break could actually boost the originality of later ideas.
So even a demanding task during the break might help.
It seems the type of mental activity, even if it feels effortful, might somehow prime the brain.
So a bit of the right kind of mental workout, even if it's hard, could prepare the ground.
Could do. And one more, really different one. Beeptu et al., 2022. They looked at drawing on a tablet stylus versus finger versus pen.
Sensory input differences.
Yeah. And they found using a stylus, which you might think requires a bit more load than a finger, didn't actually decrease the originality of the drawings.
Yeah. So our assumptions about what increases load and how it affects creativity aren't always right.
Exactly. Even subtle tool differences might not have the impact we expect.
Okay, so that covers studies where they changed the load. But what about studies where cognitive load was the outcome, the thing being measured? What did those tell us?
These looked at how different activities affected the mental effort people felt. For instance, Chidersky et al. In 2021 looked at physically manipulating elements in insight problems.
Like moving pieces around.
Yeah. You might think physically interacting makes it easier, less mental strain, right?
Seems illogical.
But they found it didn't consistently lower cognitive load or boost creativity.
So just because it's hands-on doesn't mean it's less mentally demanding or automatically better for creative solutions.
Seems not. Mohammed Ahmed et al.
Mm.
In 2013 compared design tools, hand sketches, physical models, CAD software. They looked at the perceived load of using them versus the creativity of the designs.
And
Interestingly, they didn't find a clear, significant link. The perceived effort didn't strongly predict the creative outcome in their study.
which, again, just highlights how complex this is, not simple cause and effect.
Exactly. But on the flip side, H. Chen and colleagues in a couple of 2022 studies looked at guided meditation with animation.
Animation during meditation.
Yeah. They found the animation actually reduced the cognitive load of doing the meditation.
Okay.
And this reduction seemed to boost the meditation's benefits and also positively influence creativity afterwards.
So, again, how information or guidance is presented can really change the mental effort and the creative results.
Absolutely. Sun et al. In 2016 looked at different ways to structure design problems. They found certain structuring strategies could actually boost creativity without significantly increasing the mental effort.
That's encouraging. We can find ways to work that are creatively effective but don't fry our brains.
Hopefully. Then, Shemikina and Nagornova in 2019 looked at creative tasks that involved overcoming stereotypes.
Breaking mental patterns.
Right. They found that doing that, breaking free from established thinking, actually demanded more mental effort.
Makes sense. It's hard work.
And Sylvia et al. Back in 2014 found that people with a history of higher creative achievements actually showed greater cognitive effort during divergent thinking tasks.
So wait, people who are more creative actually work harder mentally on these tasks.
It suggests that yes, that feeling of really having to engage, to push mentally, might actually be a sign you're going beyond the usual limits, achieving something more substantial.
So sometimes that effort is the work of creativity, not just a barrier to it.
It could be. It suggests a certain focused mental engagement might characterize deeper creative work.
Okay. Now, the review also mentioned cognitive load as a mediator. You explained that earlier. It explains the how. How does that play out here?
Right. So in these studies, cognitive load is the bridge explaining how one thing affects creativity. For example, Howe et al., again, 2015, they looked at speaking versus writing ideas down.
And how that affected creativity.
Yeah, originality and fluency. They found the medium speaking versus writing mattered, and this effect was mediated by cognitive load. Speaking seemed to impose a higher mental load in their setup.
So the act of having to verbalize on the spot requires more processing, maybe? And that changes the creative output through that increased effort.
Precisely. Jung Lee in 2015 looked at relationship conflict and creativity. They found cognitive effort mediated that link, depending on someone's relational self.
Complex stuff.
It is. Redifer et al. In 2019 showed that our own beliefs about creativity, our implicit theories, can influence our performance. And again, this was partly explained by the cognitive load experienced.
It's like our mindset affects how much energy we invest, and that investment shapes the outcome.
Exactly. And you see this in applied settings too. Foisy Chen et al. Looked at VR and creativity in 2022, with cognitive load mediating the link.
VR's impact explained by load.
Partially, yeah. And Verplank's 2021 study in law enforcement training. They found effective trainers designed simulations to reduce unnecessary cognitive load.
Extraneous load.
Right, which then allowed trainees to think more creatively in handling crises.
So smart design, whether it's VR or training, can clear the mental decks, letting creative problem solving happen.
Absolutely. Redifer et al. Again, in 2021, looked at performance feedback and creative self-belief, how they impacted load and then thinking. And Mill et al. In 2022 showed how irrelevant background stuff, like noise,
Distractions.
yeah, how those can influence creativity, again mediated through cognitive load.
Wow. It's quite striking how many different factors seem to channel their influence on creativity through this cognitive load mechanism.
It really highlights how central our mental processing capacity is to the whole creative endeavor.
So all this research must have practical takeaways, right? The review mentions strategies for managing cognitive load. What did it suggest we can actually do?
Yeah, it pointed to three main types of strategies. First, using external resources.
Like tools.
Exactly. Anything that helps offload mental storage or processing, like notes, checklists, digital organizers, anything that stops you having to hold it all in your head.
Freeing up working memory. Makes sense.
Second, environmental interventions. Basically tweaking your surroundings.
Like finding a quiet space.
Yeah, minimizing distractions, reducing unnecessary mental clutter. Could be quiet, could be noise-canceling headphones, whatever works for you.
Okay. And the third.
Self-regulation. These are the techniques we use on ourselves.
Like what?
Taking breaks, mindfulness practices, using focus techniques like Pomodoro, managing your own mental state and effort.
So it's a mix of external setup and internal management. Finding that sweet spot.
Precisely. And the review also made a point for researchers just about being careful with methodology, internal validity, external validity.
Making sure the studies are solid and the findings actually apply elsewhere, the science behind the science.
Exactly. Ensuring we can trust the conclusions.
Right. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the main message? The key thing for listeners to hold on to about cognitive load and creative thinking?
I think the biggest thing is just how complex and multifaceted this relationship is. It's definitely not as simple as less load equals more creativity. That's just not the full picture.
Yeah, we've seen it can hinder, maybe sometimes help in specific ways.
Right. And often it acts as that crucial link, the mediator, explaining how other things impact our creative side.
So it's not about just blindly minimizing all mental effort. It's more about understanding the type of load, the context, how it interacts with everything else.
Exactly. Is it load from the task itself or from distractions? Is it stimulating or overwhelming? Developing that nuanced understanding is key.
And that seems really valuable. It gets you thinking more deliberately about your own creative process, doesn't it?
It does.
Which makes me think, for you listening right now, when do you feel most creative? Think about the mental effort involved then. Are there things you already do, maybe without realizing it, to manage your mental load when you're trying to generate ideas or solve problems?
Yeah, that's a great reflection point, and it leads to, I think, a really interesting final thought to ponder. Given all these different roles cognitive load can play, how could we actually intentionally design our environments or structure our tasks or even, manage our own mental states
Yeah.
to promote the specific kind of cognitive load that helps the specific type of creativity we need at that moment?
That's a fantastic question. Moving beyond just more or less load to thinking about the right load for the job, how to intentionally harness it to fuel creativity.
Exactly.
Lots to think about there. Well, thanks for exploring this deep dive with us today. Stay curious, everyone, and keep digging into those connections.